Novak Djokovic, ace tennis player and now an anti-vax hero. Djokovic successfully challenged his immigration detention in Australia almost a week after he flew into the country. However, he can still be detained and deported by the Australian government, but right now he's training to compete in the Australian Open. The world number one is not vaccinated against COVID 19 and was not granted entry into Australia. He received a medical exemption as he contracted COVID 19 just last month, the second time he has been infected. A quick note here, Djokovic is against mandatory vaccination and has confirmed his vaccination status. This whole detention saga has been covered widely by the international media and has caused a political spat between Canberra and Belgrade. Australian PM Scott Morrison spoke to his Siberian counterpart Anna Brnabic on Monday to explain the nation's border policy, while the Serbian leader emphasized that Djokovic should be able to prepare for the tournament. When Djokovic was detained, there were actually protests supporting the Serb in Australia. This is not a one off incident. There have been several anti vax protests in several cities in Australia over the past months. The movement is actually quite small. Over 92% of the people aged 16 and above have received the second dose of vaccination. It is important to remember that anti vax protests are not unique to Australia alone, and several nations across the world have reported sporadic protests against vaccine mandates, vaccine passports, and even restrictions to stop the spread of the COVID infection. Europe is currently facing a surge in COVID 19 cases, and almost all governments in that continent are placing very strict restrictions. Take France, for example. People in France need to show proof that they are vaccinated or produce a negative COVID 19 test to enter restaurants, bars, and even use interregional trains. Now, the government wants to drop the test option. In the US, though there is no mandate from the government as such, several companies are pushing their employees to get vaccinated. In fact, some people are advocating that governments stop giving unvaccinated people access to social security schemes. Even as governments place stricter restrictions, especially on the unvaccinated, there has been a backlash from the public. Just last week, thousands of people across Western Europe protested against COVID 19 vaccine requirements. In France, more than 1 lakh people took to the streets to oppose the government's plans to enforce vaccination. People around the world are bearing the brunt of the COVID 19 pandemic for the third year now. Governments must address this growing public frustration and take initiative to talk to those who are hesitant about taking COVID 19 vaccines. This involves having an honest conversation with the public about the efficacy of the vaccines, the rationale behind imposing lockdowns, and why guidelines are being changed. This could also be a great way to tackle fake news and conspiracy theories surrounding